Hi, good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you for joining. We are just going to give it a few seconds. I can see more people currently joining now. So yeah, give some people time to finish making their coffee, finish making their sandwich. But as Andreas is demonstrating, but yeah, already quite a few joined. So look, thank you to those for being on time and welcome. Some familiar faces there, which is great to see. Hey, Simon, Steve, welcome, good afternoon. And some new faces as well, which is brilliant. Just while we're waiting, I am going to just pass over to Andreas just to give a quick introduction to himself and a bit of background whilst we wait for everybody else to kind of join, and then we will kick off. Andreas?
Yeah, sorry. Good afternoon, everybody. Andreas from Wingerden is the name. I'm the solutions architect for Liquidware for UK and Ireland, as well as the rest of the Northern Europe. I've now been in the industry for, I think, about 25 years. The last 2 years with Liquidware, and prior to that, I've been at Citrix. So I'm somewhat familiar, let's say, with the whole workspace challenges we face. In a few moments, I think I'll just kick it off, David, or do you want us to wait a bit more?
Yeah, we just give it a couple of minutes, and I think just from my perspective as well, for those that don't know me or that we haven't worked with before, my name is David Whiting. I'm the regional sales director here for Liquidware for the UK and Ireland. And again, just wanted to say, look, thank you for attending today. I think this is the first webinar we have done targeting the UK and Ireland. We're a fairly new presence in the region in terms of actually being in the region. So this is the first one we've done. I think the number of registrations that we had was great actually, and the number of people that have attended today as well. So for our first one, I'm really pleased with that. So thank you very much for your time. The webinar today is all around kind of application management in the modern workplace. And I think that is really a topic that's at the forefront at the moment, with the way that the modern workplace has changed a lot, and applications have obviously become so important to any organization. And I think there's a few key areas obviously that are impacted by application management and impacts on organizations. The first one being cost. I think the amount of customers that we've spoken to and prospects we speak to, when you talk to them around how they manage applications and the life cycle management of applications, they talk about things like outsourcing maybe application packaging to third parties, and then they go into the cost that is associated with that per application, per version, and the money that they are currently investing in applications and the application life cycle. The second area is time. So the amount of time spent, certainly for organizations that do everything in-house, or maybe for partners who do it on behalf of their customers, the amount of time it takes. A lot of the time there are dedicated teams that are purely focused on just applications, just doing the packaging, the testing, the delivery, the updating, and the time that they have to invest in that. The third one, kind of end user experience. So very often end users are disrupted by applications, or applications are crashing, or they, in the worst case, sometimes not even got access to the applications they need. And that obviously has an impact on their productivity, but also on the revenue for the organization. So the impact that it has on your end users. And then I think the last one, and probably the most important, is the impact that it has on security. Now we all see a lot in the news, very publicized kind of data breaches that happen. I think locally to us in the UK, looking at the Metropolitan Police this year, the JD Sports Group, with the data breaches that they've occurred, more globally AT&T this year, Twitter at the start of the year. And these aren't data breaches where, tens of records have been stolen and publicized, but kind of more like tens of millions, and the impact that has on these organizations from a financial standpoint in terms of penalties and things, to reputational damage and the knock-on effect it can have with that. And the reason I mentioned security with this is because we posted a blog recently, but over 30% of data breaches occur through applications that are not up to date, that are not patched. And that's obviously leaving a huge open door to attackers, a huge open door to people who are then able to access that kind of data, steal that kind of data, and inflict that kind of pain on organizations. And I guess the question then is, why are organizations not keeping applications up to date? Why are they not up to date with their patching? Why are they leaving this door open and this kind of vulnerability? And I think that the answer that we're going to go into now, and Andreas is going to talk about in detail, is because it's very, very difficult, if not impossible, to keep applications current and up to date purely using native technologies. And I am now going to pass over to Andreas to go into that in more detail. Just before I do, if any questions come up, if you have any questions during this presentation, please enter them into the questions box, and at the end we will have 10 minutes where we will address your questions. So thank you very much, and Andreas.
Thank you, David. So during this 30-35 minutes pitch, I will try and explain to you the challenges I see when it comes to application management for the modern workplace. The one thing that stands out to me is that for the past 2 decades, for as long as I've been in end user computing, I've seen organizations do the same thing but continue to expect different results, which to me just doesn't make sense. The old way of doing things, the traditional way of doing things, by looking at a workspace as being the end product in which we have an image, we do some patch management, we allocate group policies, think about software distribution. Most of the time that's being hard-coded into the operating system, and then adding some client management tools just isn't flexible enough for today's world. The challenges we've seen are, as David was alluding to, are all around these different types of topics. Sure, security is one thing, but we also find that our organization expects much more as a service-like approach, and not so much software as a service as meaning we just want to use a web browser and everything should be webified, because what we know from a user experience point of view, the browser just can't always deliver the functionality users are accustomed to. If you look at Office 365, for instance, there's a good thing you can do using just the web-based version of the application. But if you really go into the more hardcore functionality, the user will require the full-blown application to be accessible. And this applies to so many line of business applications, maybe unfortunately, but the reality is that a lot of our software just can't be webified while maintaining the same level of costs. Add to that the fact that what we find when we talk to our customers is that for a lot of them, they have a huge challenge when it comes to finding the right people to manage everything. A lot of organizations have to resort back to either hiring people from the open market or completely outsourcing their operations, which again has a negative impact on the overall cost of these environments. And recently I made the analogy to, if we think about it, we've come from Clippy into full-blown AI. This is the same transformation we should be looking at and to use when it comes to thinking about the workspace. And this is not just our philosophy. Even Gartner earlier this year brought out a report that said, look at the workspace much more from a modular approach. Look at it like, okay, yes, we have this underlying unified endpoint management platform that will look after our devices. But everything that we need to run and operate on those machines should be modular. We should be looking at these things as a modular component that we can take off the shelf if and when needed, rather than stuffing it all into one baseline environment, because that way it just will not suffice for the end users at the end of the day. They will find that the level of quality and the level of service they're receiving from their own IT department will just not be sufficient for them to be as productive as they could be. Now, rather than going into a long list of features and benefits and technological possibilities, I thought what I would do this afternoon is actually just go over a few use cases I've come across in the past 2 years while working with Liquidware and their customers. So the first customer I actually ran into was a finance customer, and their biggest challenge was that Microsoft has now finally put an end date, an expiration date on AppV. And for them and the size they were in, that means that they just couldn't wait until May 2026, but they had to start much earlier. Also, what I wanted to do, as a result of all kinds of mergers and acquisitions, they needed to consolidate their application landscape while also being able to actually do a global distribution. The key thing for them was also to have all of that, modularize every individual application while still offering the possibility for users to be offline and have full access to their application. And that's where we came in. They had looked at the market and they've deemed that the solutions offered out there outside of Liquidware were just not sufficient for their use case. The proposed solution from Microsoft to move from AppV to MSIX just wasn't covering their needs. So they came to us and they said, look, we really like your idea and the way you approach things. Could you help us, together with our system integrator, could you help us move forward in getting our application challenge solved? And that's what we've been on with them. On that journey for the past 2 years, we've been helping them because for a lot of organizations, this is not a 6 months approach. Their application landscape was huge, and trying to consolidate all of that and apply logic thinking about, okay, do we really need 10 different versions of the same applications? Or could we suffice with perhaps 1 or 2? Would that be enough? And as you could imagine, that also involved a lot of politics. A completely different customer was facing different challenges, but still all around how to get their applications delivered to their end users. This was a construction company. And what they faced was that they had numerous locations throughout the year that needed to be facilitated with IT services. And their challenge was that the size of their applications, just the install size, could take up to 2 to 3 hours just to install a software package. As you can imagine, that really has a negative impact on how productive people could be, let alone if you're on a building site connected with 3G, do you really want them to actually pull down 20 gigs worth of application data? Obviously not. So you want to also make sure that the environment actually understands the context in which the user is before it starts deploying the software. Furthermore, they have the ambition to completely get rid of their own data centers and move completely into the cloud, while at the same time migrating from virtual to physical endpoints. And together with Liquidware's help, they're able to do so. We are able to deliver those applications considering the context in which the users are, as well as their full IT environment, but while remaining a personalized end result for the end user, and rather than having a one-size-fits-all. Within the managed service providers, what we're seeing for a lot of them is that one of the biggest challenges, obviously, they face that up until now, a lot of our regular enterprise customers didn't face, is the whole multiple tenants. They have several small to medium-sized companies that they need to service, and all of them have their own identity management platform. If you have such an enormous amount of customer base, you can imagine that not all of them will have the same approach moving forward. Some will have virtual, some will have physical, some will have cloud-based desktops. They even have customers that use shared devices. And from a unified endpoint management perspective, a shared device is a bit of a tough cookie, because the problem is that a device management doesn't take into consideration the fact that the user might well change and the requirements from that user might change as well. So what they did together with our help was that based on the user that logged on, they would get the application landscape they would need to do their job while maintaining the cost efficiency of using shared devices, since they were all using, not all users were actually working at the same point in time. Now, while at Citrix, I've spent a lot of time working with governmental institutions, and they have historically been using a lot of virtualized environments. For them, the biggest challenge in those environments has been, how many golden images do I have? I mean, the promise of a golden image is that you only have one, and then you can just replicate and rinse and repeat how many workspaces you actually need or how many server instances you actually need. What they found over time is that if you're not careful, you end up with 40 or 50 different golden images that you continuously need to maintain. Maintaining a golden image for them is a huge challenge, attached to it a huge cost to keep it all up to date. We're seeing a lot of consolidation there as well and becoming much more like a shared service center. So again, also they as well are running into this whole multi-tenancy requirement and users living in their own space. And the last thing you want to do is then maintain an app per tenant. What you really wanted to do, and that's what we offered with our FlexApp solution, is give them a solution that just says package once and use over all of those different tenants and all of those different delivery platforms. And even though they're now moving into a more increased hybrid environment in which virtual, physical, and cloud go hand in hand, from an application lifecycle management perspective, to them, the story is still the same. We have one image across all of our tenants, across all of our different delivery platforms. And the last scenario I wanted to cover is one we see a lot in education. In education, we find that they've been the front runners when it comes to adopting a scenario in which we face non-domain joined devices. Users will bring in their own device. They won't even be managed, but they do require you as a service provider to actually deliver the applications to them. With our solution, you're able to do so. We do not require the laptop to be fully under control. We can just give them a client and we can then push the applications to them. Push as well as pull, because one of the things David didn't mention was, it's not so much that what we find is that organizations are unwilling to update. It's more that they're afraid that if the update goes wrong, there's no proper way of going back. And what we offer with our solution is the possibility to just quickly take away the app in its old version and replace it with the new one. And if the new one fails, vice versa, without leaving any traces of the application software on the endpoint. So especially in a BYOD scenario, for a lot of consumers, a lot of employees, students, this is a huge thing, because they will know and understand and can count on the fact that their IT department will not be destroying their laptop and their environment. So several use cases, but all of these have a few things in common, especially for what we find with all organizations, that everybody has an application headache. Everybody is challenged with, how do I get my app updated and out there? And this is not just the simple applications like a browser or utilities. No, this is also, and perhaps even more so, for line of business applications. I've heard numerous stories in which organizations will tell me that to get an application fitted within Intune or any other unified endpoint management, the whole packaging process, the whole getting it all silent, the whole scenario of not having to need any form of user interaction to get the application installed is a huge challenge with a huge cost attached to it. They've all found that if you move into this modern workplace scenario in which you say, what's best for our users and what technology supports them, they need to look at a modern solution when it comes to managing those environments. Another thing that they all have in common is the requirement, or I should say the need to automate stuff. DevOps, infrastructure as code, are things that a lot of IT companies are looking at and really wanting to invest in, because that will take away a lot of the pressure points with the reduction in talent. And last but certainly not least, and I think that will make things only even more complicated moving forward, we see that there's an increase in the security requirements. Now, I'm not saying Liquidware is a security company, because we are far away from that. But updating your software and keeping it updated is step one. All the other stuff needs to follow that starting point. It's a bit like if we're not plugging the hole, we can pump water out of the ship as much as we can, but the water will continue to come in. And that's the same approach to how and why we need to update our software. Now the question is, how is Liquidware helping them? What is your approach? And to help you understand what we do, let me just explain to you our approach to all of our products, as well as our application technology. For us, we do not discriminate about the delivery platform, whether it's physical, virtual, or cloud. And if it's virtual, whichever vendor you'd like to choose, to us, that's just a given. There is a delivery platform. The same applies to the Windows layer. We do not distinguish between a desktop OS or a server OS, a single user or a multi-user OS. To us, it's all the same. It's Windows, and it should be running the applications we want to offer to our end users. Where we do come to place, and I've alluded to it somewhere already, is around the whole context of the environment. Context has become so much more important in the past 24 months when we look at the way we are now going about our business. People are working from all kinds of different places. They are no longer coming into work each and every day. They will be moving around. They might be working from home, from construction sites, from wherever. And from a organizational and a service delivery perspective, we need to take that into consideration. And that's where we made our first stride. Next, what we're saying is put your applications into individual layers. Rather than making it one big layer with everything stuffed inside and still kept maintaining that whole unmanageable approach, keep every application stuck within its own layer. Think about how we're doing and managing the user environment. We have what we also say, you know what, we are an open organization. We do not enforce our way of thinking on you. If you think that profile disks from Microsoft are good enough, by all means go about it, but at least separate it out. And last but not least, apply any form of endpoint analytics. Digital experience monitoring can no longer just be a nice to have, but should become a requirement. But we need to find budget within the way we maintain the workspaces, and that's been our focus at Liquidware. Given that how we look at the workspace, we've also said from an architectural perspective, we want to give you freedom of choice. If you find yourself still in a scenario that you need to maintain your own data center and everything should live inside that own data center, fine. If you're fully into cloud or on your way to the cloud and you find yourself in a hybrid scenario, also fine. And the same applies from the workspace. Our architecture is built to support every form of delivery mechanism out there today. Yes, obviously we do officially support only a few of those major cloud players, but I think while supporting Amazon, Azure, and Google, we've covered most of our bases. Well, we even offer solutions much more in the consumer space of the way that we want to integrate it into our architecture. And I think this is one of the most technical slides out there. I've mentioned a lot of our traditional approaches, and to me, traditional approaches are natively installing applications. We've been doing that since the day we've got a hard drive in our machine. And we all know that in the life cycle of our device, our machine will need to be re-imaged at least once. Stuff will break down, especially if we start updating, installing, and removing. There's a good chance at one point your machine will just show you the nice little Windows repair screen. So to me, that can no longer be the case moving forward. The same applies to a lot of this isolation and containerization technology. Sure, it's nice on paper, but what we found for a lot of organizations, the challenge becomes once you start bringing in your line of business applications. These line of business applications need to integrate with all sorts of things, and living inside an isolated capsule just doesn't work. There is no integration, hence why it's called isolation. The application will be isolated inside its own little jail. And sure, with the recent developments in containerization, there are some forms of integration. When we really dive deeper into it, that's where stuff still breaks down. Application compatibility for MSIX at this point in time, without any tooling around it, is around 30%. That just isn't good enough. And I'm being actually even very generous. Recently, I spoke to a customer that told me our application compatibility for MSIX is 10% of our application landscape. And then we're not talking about the simple things and every demo where we can find on YouTube, etc. We're talking about true applications organizations are using today. So when we went out to choose our base technology, we came across a technology that was being described as application layering. And application layering offers me the same basic principle as the way isolation used to do historically. An app is being reduced to a single entity to manage. However, with application layering, it's not isolated, it's not containerized. No, it's a layer which is fully transparent to all of the layers underneath or above it, as well as the underlying operating system. Meaning an application will behave as if it's installed locally. So we get all the good from installed applications combined with all the good of isolated applications while maintaining a future-proof scenario. What we at Liquidware then said is, okay, that's a nice basic philosophy, but we're going to take a few of the other pieces. One of the things being micro-isolation, making sure that if there is still a conflict, even though DLL hell tends to be something left behind, if it is there, if it is happening, we have a solution built into the product. But what we've also do and why we are actually advocating with 90% plus application compatibility is that we try to make sure that we cover all of the possibilities and technologies an application might have included. We've had a third party actually look at our technology and have it compared against AppV and MSIX, and they've concluded as well is that with FlexApp, you get the biggest chance of your application being able to run within a managed little layer. All in all, the biggest benefit for a lot of our organizations and customers are you only need to install the application once. Basically, you package it once, and whether it's for a different tenant, for a different platform, there is no need to retouch that package unless the application obviously doesn't work on the targeted platform. So an app which runs on Windows 10 can easily be rolled out to Windows 11 multi-user on AVD. But it can just as easily be deployed physically to a laptop without needing to retouch the package. Even though it is a unified version of the app, we can still maintain personalization. We have full access to all the possibilities Microsoft offers on the end user platform. We've built in automated packaging to help organizations transition from an SCCM to an Intune scenario, or including online repositories like Wingerden and Chocolatey into their packaging environment and having those packages be automatically created based on the template we ourselves have defined. And with ourselves, I mean you, our customers. And because we've made it so portable, we've also thought about security. One of the things customers came back with was, yeah, you've just made this app ultra portable. How can I make sure it doesn't end up in the wrong hands? And what we've included is basically twofold. First of all, you're able to sign the application with your own digital certificate, meaning the receiver will be able to validate it's coming from a trusted environment. Secondly, what we've done is that in order for you to mount it, and we require OAuth validation, meaning the user needs to be part of the tenant you've assigned to be allowed to use the application. And this way, we're making sure that there's basically a two-way approach to the way we deal with security. A lot of technology, the proof is always in the pudding and showing how it actually works. Now, in order for us to maintain within the allocated time, I've just recorded a simple demo of me logging into a fully empty base image Windows 11 without any profile, without any applications attached. And what happens during login is that the environment will actually check which applications I'm entitled to and combine that with applications that potentially have been assigned on a machine level. So by the time I actually get to my desktop, all of my software will be there as if it had been pre-installed within the image. But they all live in their own little layer that can easily be taken away once unassigned from me. From a Windows perspective, the app will register as if it is indeed been installed into the OS. Performance-wise, there is no degradation in performance, no noticeable at least. An application that takes long to load will still take long to load, but an application which is easy or integrates into the context menu of a user will still integrate into the context menu of the user without any fiddling about. It's just a matter of strictly, while we're packaging it, just deciding what is it I need. So from a packaging perspective, I'll give the application a name, give it my own internal versioning number, set up the installer, and decide, does this need to land on my own data centers storage, or will it be uploaded into the cloud? How big is the disk? And from the moment I press create, it's basically, as a packager, the only thing you need to understand is, how do I need to install it? Is it next, finish? Or do I need to include all kinds of settings? All of the stuff you do while packaging the application will remain within the package, but can still be easily changed post-production of the package using a GUI. So there's no need to be fiddling around with all kinds of PowerShell scripting or large XML files just to get the package ready. It's all menu driven, while offering you also still the possibility to, if the need requires it, include all kinds of scripting functionality or customize it through a user environment management environment. So if anything, take away from this session that we as Liquidware offer you the modular approach Gartner has been talking about. We offer a platform-agnostic solution. So we will not tie you into a decision which might well be valid today, but might become obsolete tomorrow. We offer automation, infrastructure as code. If you're really wanting to move into that area, Liquidware has got you covered, while maintaining and giving you integrated security. And with that, I've come to the end of my slides. David, are there any questions?
We do have a couple, yes. So the first one that's come in is, can FlexApp handle drivers?
Yes and no. The only thing any form of isolation or virtualization technology can't do is kernel level drivers. Now, luckily, those are far and few between. Any other type of driver can become part of the Liquidware package. So for instance, an application which generates a PDF printer driver for you to actually integrate that into your line of business can fully be packaged within FlexApp.
Perfect. Is FlexApp limited to only one Azure AD?
From a management layer, we do limit you to one Azure AD to orchestrate your role-based access control. But from an end user perspective, we do not really limit you to one Azure AD.
Okay. Is there a limitation on the amount of apps that can be distributed via FlexApp?
There is a theoretical limit of 2048 virtual hard drives that you can attach to one running instance of Windows. Windows. I would never advocate to go that far, but from an application compatibility perspective, we obviously offer 90%. So there's a good chance that you might well be ending up with a lot of disks being mounted dynamically to your workspace. That's not a problem. There is obviously a time delay, and that's why we also offer the possibility to decide your own moment in time when apps actually get added to the environment. So for instance, we could add applications during the startup of the machine, something which is very common in virtualized and cloud-based environment, because that's the time nobody actually has any problem with them, because nobody's being able to access them anyway. What we can then do is, based on the user's credential, either add in additional applications or hide, we call it cloaking, some of the applications that we've mounted during boot, which the user just isn't entitled to. And to top it all off, what we can also offer is what we call on-demand applications. That means that the user will see the application, but they just haven't been mounted yet because they are being used too infrequently. So only once the user actually starts up the application will we actually go over and mount the application. And that's how we tend to balance a workspace out at the end of the day, making sure that we have the biggest benefit for our buck.
Perfect. Good. Thank you. That looks like, oh no, one more has just come in here. Are there any limitations on the evaluation versions of FlexApp, and can they be set up in a lab environment to evaluate?
Well, if you're too scared to either contact me or David or any of the other Liquidware employees out there, the downloadable version actually includes a 14-day license for 5 users out of the box. But if you think, oh, you know what, I'm going to need a little bit longer, just reach out to us and we can go over how long you'd need and for how many users, if you really want to do some stress testing.
Yeah.
But then just reach out to me or David to actually set that all up.
Yeah, absolutely. And another one just come in here. Can you stream instead of mounting the layers?
I think I'm not going to give the typical consultancy answer, as in it depends. Yes, so there are multiple ways to go about this. What we've traditionally done with mounting the app was actually that we just used the network as an extension of the server's hard disk connection. So no caching on the virtualized environment. What we found was, while we're moving to the cloud, that wasn't really an option. Latency on cloud connections, even though you're in, let's say, only Azure, can still pile up. So we've now offered the possibility to cache blocks of the data, and you can actually optimize that as well on the endpoint. And what we also offer is, as I said earlier, a full offline type of scenario. So there's multiple ways of going about how do I actually want to, and what makes sense to me in mounting those applications to my running Windows instance. I hope that answers the questions for the individual that asked it.
Well,
if not, just give me a call.
If not, then please reach out directly after this, and we can organise a session to go into more detail there. So, no problem at all. But that looks like it's the end of the questions. So, if nobody else has any questions, then thank you very much for attending today. Really appreciate you taking time out of your lunch break to spend time with us. I hope it's been useful. Thank you, Andreas, for your time. And if anybody's got any further questions or wants some more information, then yeah, please do not hesitate to reach out to us directly. We'd be more than happy to set up a follow-up session. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.